committee investigating the government's relationship and the unfolding of a contract given to the We charity. Justin Trudeau will appear, which is unusual to say the least. It's at least not a common occurrence in Canadian politics that a sitting Prime Minister should appear before a committee like this. Michael Cooper is the Conservative Party's Deputy Finance Critic. He's with us now. Michael, thank you very much for being with us. And I guess I'd like to start by asking what you would like to hear from the Prime Minister on Thursday.
Well, we need to get answers from the Prime Minister in terms of his relationship with the We organization, what communications he had, what his involvement was, why he failed to recuse himself, despite the fact that the We organization had politically and socially benefited him and enriched his family to the tune of more than $300,000. And we also have to know whether or not his family received any form of expenses from the We charity like that of Bill Morneau. So there's lots of questions to ask.
In terms of the process here, the Prime Minister and other members of the Cabinet that have associations have been upfront in the sense that they've apologized, they acknowledge they should have recused themselves. Is there something else that you think needs to happen here other than that, than an acknowledgement that a mistake was made?
Well, more than a mistake was made. In the case of the Finance Minister, it's very clear that he breached multiple sections of the Conflict of Interest Act, at least 5 sections. The Prime Minister likely similarly contravened several sections of the Conflict of Interest Act in failing to recuse himself. So it's not just a matter of saying, well, we're sorry. There's a lot more here in terms of the seriousness of the matter.
What could the Prime Minister say, or the Finance Minister for that matter? As you say, they have breached official portions of the Conflicts of Interest Act. What should be then the outcome of that, in your view? There is, as we all know, an Ethics Commission investigation underway into both. What do you think should be the outcome here?
Well, I guess we'll have to follow the evidence where it leads us. And at this point in time, there is sufficient evidence for the Ethics Commissioner to have launched an investigation into both the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister. And so that is happening. We have written to the Ethics Commissioner to encourage him to expand his investigation into Finance Minister Morneau based upon his testimony from last week, in which he admitted that he failed to pay back $41,000 in illegal travel expenses from We until just by coincidence on the eve or the day that he appeared before the Finance Committee. So we'll see where the evidence leads us, but we need answers, and we need sufficient time to ensure that adequate questioning can be offered and answers can be provided by the Prime Minister. If it's simply a matter of him coming in for an hour, that's not going to be good enough.
What would be good enough? What else would you expect to have happen? If, we've got the Ethics Commission investigation, the Finance Committee. What else could happen?
Well, we need sufficient time, a few hours at least, with the Prime Minister, a few hours at least with the Kielburgers, and some time as well with Katie Telford. And given the involvement of Minister Ring in at least some communications that she had with We, including a proposal respecting coming out of early April, we probably also need to hear from her as well.
We did just hear not too long ago the fiscal update, a snapshot of where we stand. As we all know, there have been a record amount spent to help Canadians and Canadian businesses through this pandemic. Should we expect to hear from your party a formal sort of path to balance? Is that something that we could expect at some point in time, a kind of a very detailed plan that might work away at that deficit?
Well, the deficit is unprecedented at this time. And the fact is that we have a government that left the cupboard bare going in. And as a result, this government has put Canada in a much more vulnerable economic position. So there's a lot of work ahead. But in terms of what is before us right now in terms of this government, And this scandal, I think it should concern all Canadians because it goes to the very trust that Canadians should be able to have in the Prime Minister and in their government. And based upon what we know, it's very clear that the Finance Minister certainly breached the trust that was afforded to him in the office that he holds. It's why we're calling on him to resign. And as far as the Prime Minister goes, we need to get answers as to why the We organization got the inside track, because this is an organization that, based upon everything we do know, had no capacity to do this, had no track record of undertaking a program such as this. It seems that the only reason it ended up in their hands is because they were friends with the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister and had benefited both and their families, and that's just unacceptable.
Well, you might agree, Michael, that goes a bit too far. There had been no program like this, so of course there could be no precedent for it in any event. This is probably the only organization of the size and scale in the country that could manage this program. As we've seen, it'll land back in government hands. Whether that's good or bad is another question. But if you're looking in the private, not-for-profit space, this would be the organization that would come to mind, regardless of one's attachment to it. Wouldn't you agree?
On the basis of what? This organization had no track record of connecting young Canadians with the not-for-profit sector. Organizations like Volunteer Canada have such a track record, and they were not even considered in any serious extent. I mean, really, there's very little evidence up until this point that the government considered any other entity other than we. But why the government needed to go and start another program in the first place doesn't make sense, because if the government was really interested in connecting youth with not-for-profit organizations, there was a very easy way to go about doing that, and that was simply to provide additional resources to a program that has existed for more than 2 decades, and that is called the Canada Summer Jobs Program. But they didn't do that. Instead, they, for whatever reason, went to the We organization. Again, why? Well, it's unclear other than the connections that we know of.
All right, but I can't let you go without just maybe correcting, you used the words breach of trust in reference to the Finance Minister. I think it'll be up to the Ethics Commission to determine whether or not such a breach occurred. I believe it's a term of art, so we've got to be a little careful. You can have your point of view on it, but I don't think we can officially call it that at this stage.
Well, there might also have been breach of trust in terms of the criminal code, and that's something that I think the RCMP needs to. But
again, I want to be very careful here that you're speculating with language that is it is legal in nature, so we want to be a little bit careful about what you mean. You maybe have lost the trust, we can say, but breach of trust is a loaded term, sir.
There is two things are absolutely indisputable, and that is that the Finance Minister breached the Conflict of Interest Act, including Section 23. That is clear-cut. He also breached the Code of Conduct.
Surely that is for the Ethics Commissioner to determine. Michael, surely the Ethics Commissioner will determine that question. It may seem as though that has happened, but we cannot say so with any definitive way until the Ethics Commissioner has weighed in.
Well, actually,
let's give everybody their day, right?
Well, when it comes to Section 23, that section relates to if, in fact, somehow these expenses were allowable, there is a reporting requirement for any expense or a gift or advantage over $200. The minister didn't report that to the in the proper way, and therefore he's in breach of that section. So that's very clear-cut.
All right, Michael Cooper, we've got to leave it there. We appreciate your time today. Michael Cooper is the Conservative Party's Deputy Finance Critic. Thank you very much for that.